Okay, so we're answering a few questions,
Answering a few
you
questions.
suggested. And this rather unconventional space is my garage, which we intend to sort of eventually turn into our studio.
Yep. So we'll be recording most of our videos in here, hopefully
Yeah.
soon.
It's not too bad. It's full of junk, so the acoustics are okay. It's not too echoey.
We'll start off with a question from Kenny. He asks, how do you get to your final few images when you take some pictures? So how do you decide which ones you're going to send? And from looking back at shoots, do you have any pictures which you wish you had sent?
I'm a terrible editor, and I think I've realised that I edit poorly through the process of talking to other photographers. So I've gone through various phases. So initially I was shooting on film, and you know, they didn't really have the budget, so you'd actually supply them with prints. And when I worked for the Observer in the 90s, I was basically just providing them with like 1 or 2 pictures, or maybe up to about 4 pictures, and I'd already got them printed up, and they paid for the prints, and they were my final edit.
Okay.
And looking back at those shoots, I omitted to put some really decent images in there, which is quite galling. But then it's quite exciting because you find these little gems hidden away in amongst my sort of 25,000 rolls of film with all the contacts that we've been featuring.
Show a picture of that.
But when the digital sort of paradigm shift happened and we all went to digital cameras, and suddenly you're shooting 500 pictures on a shoot, there is a temptation when you're looking at all this imagery, and it's all okay, to sort of give the magazine a big edit. And actually that's not good, because picture editors, it's their job to sort of edit, but not that much material. You have to point them in the right direction. And we just did a shoot recently, and you assisted me with a sort of fashion impresario called Philip Salon. And with that shoot, I actually enlisted my old assistant, Annie Collins, to go through the pictures, and we edited it right down, because she works in fashion, and in fashion, you really editorially just give the magazine a very, very tight edit. But there are 2 things in the past I tended to look for the technical virtuosity of a photograph. You know, I was sort of showing off. And now I tend to look for emotional impact and a picture that sort of resonates on a human level and is authentic.
Do you think that was when you shifted from film to digital, or?
I think it's just a process of growing older and becoming more soulful.
And do you think there's been more success doing it that way than your previous kind of showing off technique?
I think the showing off technique was good to get established, because you want to sort of make the other photographers look bad and lacking in imagination.
Okay.
And when I started at the Observer, the previous incumbent was a photographer called Jane Bone, and she took pictures in black and white on 35mm, and she was this sort of septuagenarian woman. She's no longer with us, sadly. And she would arrive with a camera, Olympus camera, in a basket, and she would be very disarming, but she didn't really do anything other than use daylight and these and black and white tri-X. And so when I got the opportunity, she was sort of, I think she was involved in a car crash. I wasn't sort of driving the car or anything like that, but basically I was given the opportunity to stand in for her. And I used medium format cameras and proper lighting, and I cross-processed the film and made it look much fancier. That enabled me to sort of replace her, really.
Okay.
And so
but then now I feel like you've moved more towards her style.
Yeah,
you always reiterate how important using daylight is.
Yeah, we're just using daylight to film this now. Daylight sort of has much more atmosphere. So, but in answer to your question, you know, it's a process where you just look at pictures. When you're editing them, when you narrow them down to those final few, you're looking for pictures that resonate and will stand the test of time, that are sort of meaningful to you.
When we were editing the Seal video, you said one of the pictures which you now would consider your favourite, you didn't use at the time, or you didn't send them at the time.
Exactly.
So how often does that happen?
Well, I've got better, but the Seal picture was particularly bad, because you can watch the video if you wish to.
I'll put a link in it.
I mean, I checked the other day after we'd recorded the video, and the NME actually ran the stupid picture that I kind of suggested, and maybe
with the fingers.
Maybe I only gave them the pictures. But basically, he was having his makeup done, and he has this sort of skin condition with these scars, and I had this white makeup artist and her white hands on his black skin. It's terribly cliched.
Hiding what kind of
hiding
his physical uniqueness, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So you you learn and you grow.
Okay, well, yeah, that was a great question from Kenny. Thanks for that. So this one's from Het Varkin. So what techniques can a photographer, an aspiring photographer, use to be consistent, but also start to develop their own sort of style?
As less about
standing out from the others, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, less about technique. Sort of learn your own visual language. I mean, being a photographer is just having, as I've said, sort of an opinion about how to arrange things geometrically within a frame, and you have to sort of develop an understanding of what makes a picture look well composed to your eye, and that's a very personal thing. And that comes through looking at lots of other photographers' work and then being inspired by it and sort of refining your craft. Certainly technically, you can sort of hitch your cart to various photographic techniques and so on, but if you're looking for something simple, then composition is the way you can kind of differentiate yourself from everybody else.
Cool, that's a great answer. This one's also from Het. So what strategies are effective for communicating with subjects during a photo shoot? I've kind of seen you at work now after assisting you for a few times. And,
I mean, it's a combination of, as my friend Mark used to say, it's a combination, Colin.
Okay.
It's basically a combination of various kind of basic sort of human. I mean, you don't want to be like a psychopath and sort of deconstructing the way that human beings relate to each other. But it's basically just, I try and indulge myself. So I try and have a life that consists of making new friends. And I'm sort of blessed with a sort of an interest in other people. So I'm inherently kind of, especially when I first meet someone, able to kind of genuinely have enthusiasm for asking about the minutiae of their life. And it's just really about having, you don't want to be kind of cynically thinking, well, I've got to behave like a human. I've got to sort of feign interest. I mean, it helps if you have genuine kind of enthusiasm and you're not misanthropic and you basically have a sort of positive outlook and you just want to establish a good rapport with someone. But then sometimes you can kind of get a picture when you have no rapport, you know, when things are very, very difficult. You know, a recent shoot we did with Jeremy Clarkson would be one such example.
Yeah, video on Jeremy soon.
We will do a video on that. I mean, Fred assisted me. We drove for 3 hours. We were kept waiting for 5 hours, and then we were treated with little,
pretty poorly,
pretty contemptuously.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I hear you always talk about how important it is to gain a good rapport with them, and I've seen you bring gifts, like for Jeremy. We brought pictures from the first shoot.
That's right. When I photographed Jeremy, I had photographed him 20 years previously, more than 20 years, probably more like 25. And so I printed out one of the pictures from the previous shoot and brought it along. You know. And
you always say, who wouldn't want to see themselves young 20 years ago?
Exactly.
The next question's from Jan Anton. Could you please talk about the very beginnings of your career as a portrait photographer? So if you were to start your career today, if you were to become a portrait photographer today, what would be your angle, I guess? What would be your first steps?
I think probably I would be looking to do something like this, actually, and harness the power of social media. It was a sort of cart that I sort of hitched my horse to fairly late on. And it was only sort of Jamie Oliver, actually, that who I work with on and off. We should do a video on him at some point. Who, you know, actually kind of set the benchmark. You know, he really kind of realised the power of social media, you know, and he got my sort of Instagram, he juiced it up by sort of mentioning that we'd worked together and extolling the merits of my photography practice and getting people to follow me. But I would say that the old way of making a portfolio and laminating all the prints and then going and ringing up the picture editor is no longer a kind of viable way of getting work. What I have witnessed from younger photographers who've assisted me, I mean, all my old assistants are now photographers. I was just looking at a very good one who assisted me on the shoot with Hillary Clinton. Her name's Francesca. And she's been very effective. You don't have to live in London. She lives in Cardiff, and she's very good at kind of getting on the social media platforms, and also more career-oriented platforms like LinkedIn, and connecting with picture editors in New York. If they need someone in Wales or whatever, she's their go-to person. I think your work has to be above a certain standard, but you need to sort of see Instagram as an opportunity to have an online portfolio in addition to your website, and then sort of target the people, because they're all out in the open, and sort of show them some love on social media. And I mean, these things happen. I think really it's a question of it's a different time, and it's a time that's sort of characterized by technology. So you need to use technology. So it isn't analog, it's basically digital. So it's a digital world. You can feel very anonymous. There's a lot more people doing it. It's a lot more competitive. But if you do produce something really amazing, then you can get it out onto social media, and it will spread virally, and you can go from 0 to 60 in no time.
Yeah.
When I started, I went to see the Sunday Times magazine, and they wouldn't give me any work because they were inclined to use photographers that were middle-aged, mostly men, and they were very kind of stuck. And it was only if it wasn't for the fact that the Independent had come along, and the picture editor was more inclined to use younger photographers. Her name was Victoria Lukens.
So would you credit her for your big break?
Absolutely. There's lots of little breaks that help you on your way. But
Lester Bookbinder, would you?
Yeah, Lester Bookbinder was a photographer that I assisted, and so that's good if you can kind of assist somebody who kind of is really exceptionally brilliant, and also rigorously disciplined in terms of their approach to the medium. So you sort of learn really good standards, you're not lazy. But certainly Susan Glenn and Victoria Lukens at the Independent, they gave a lot of young photographers their first break when you couldn't get a job for the Sunday Times or the Observer.
And do you know any other photographers they gave a break which are still going now?
I don't know about that. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there are. Yeah, I'm sure there are. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. So social media is pretty important, and I watched a video of another YouTuber photographer speaking, saying how important it is to move to London. So it's interesting.
I think that's no longer the case. I mean, I do think it helps. A lot of work is commissioned out of London, but nowadays, I tend to think we're all in the ether. So I don't really advertise the fact that I'm spending a lot of time out of London. As far as I'm concerned,
people think you're in London.
People think I'm in London, and to all intents and purposes, I am in London. I'm doing a shoot on Monday, and I think they are under the illusion that I'm based in London. So,
well, let's not tell them. Okay, so yeah, one last comment with some really good questions. So I'll go into those and maybe expand on them if needs be. So just to begin with, what sparked your interest in photography? I think it was around Mark, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I basically was trying to avoid doing something boring. Like most people, I was kind of very floundering around, and kind of, had a very unclear and unambitious sort of approach to life. I was very much hedonistically pursuing pleasure. So I had two friends who were at Plymouth College of Art and Design. Basically I had two friends in the sixth form, and I got wind of the fact that they were going to Plymouth College of Art and Design, Mark and Martin, and I just thought, it'll be really good. We'll play snooker, we'll go swimming in the sea, down on the Hoe. And then in the first year, I got a letter from the college saying that I'd only attended 20% of the time, and that I was being booted off the course. And in the second year, something clicked, and I got inspired, and I kind of stopped messing around and got in with a different crowd of people who were really into photography. And we started getting inspired by Richard Avedon and Irving Penn and David Bailey, and I just started to fly. You know, I got a real bug. I just fell in love with the medium.
Yeah, caught the bug.
And so suddenly, I think it's about the company you keep. So, you know, I love Mark and Martin, but they were never really going to be photographers in any kind of sense of going up to London and photographing the, being a commercial photographer in London. And I sort of got in with a couple of other people that were heading that way. So, as I say, the company you keep, your influences, you know, these serendipitous people that you meet that completely change your life.
Yeah. Where would you be if you hadn't have met them, I guess?
Yeah. Maybe doing something completely different.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. So a few quick fire ones as well. So do you remember what your first camera was?
My very first camera was probably, the first picture I ever took was with my parents had this Nicormat, which was a sort of derivative of Nikon. And I sort of pinched it and sort of took a few frames. I remember of a tap dripping.
A tap dripping, artistic.
And then my first camera that I bought, my friend Mark had a Cosina, and I copied him. I went to Exeter and I bought a Minolta SRT 100X. So that was my first sort of 35mm SLR. And then my first sort of serious camera after I left college was a Rolleiflex, which I still have, a twin lens reflex.
The exact same one? You still
Yeah,
have? Oh,
yeah,
cool.
And that's got a Carl Zeiss 2.8 planar lens, which is it's a terrific camera. I still take pictures with it occasionally now.
Wow. So have you always been freelance, or have you worked for an employer?
Yeah, I mean, apart from working in a meat abattoir locally called Lloyd Maunders, named
Not a nice place.
sound out to Lloyd Maunders. We used to sort of pack poultry and kick chickens around and stuff like that before I went to college. And then previously I worked in a air freshener factory. So you'd come, called Global Chemicals, and you'd come home stinking of these air fresheners. And then before that, as you know, because I'd always bring it up when we were young, when you guys were young, I worked on your grandfather's pig farm, mucking out pigs, you know. And it was basically, you know, you kids don't realise how good you've got it. So it became the sort of family mythology that Dad's wanging on about how hard
the pig farm. Yeah.
But once I sort of left college, I did have a job briefly in a studio in Exeter for about a month, and I was on £269 a month. But it was great. But then my friend Howell, who was one of the people that was more ambitious, he'd gone to London and he told me, come up to London and you can stay in my flat and he'd already started getting jobs, and so that
in photography?
Yeah, so
wow.
I took a risk and I just sort of jacked it all in and went up to London, and yeah.
Cool. Okay, so has there ever been a job or jobs where you've come very close to saying F off to the subject and you've just had enough?
I'd like to think that I would be one of those people that would be kind of a renegade and, you know, have this self-respect and say, fuck you. But off the top of my head, I'm just very, very professional.
Okay.
I sort of, you know, there's a great story which we should do whereby I was treated so appallingly by the fashion sort of, she's not even a designer. She was a sort of person who took credit for other people's talent, like Alexander McQueen. And her name is Isabella Blow, and she died. She took her own life by eating rat poison.
Oh my God.
And she was just an appalling, you know, kind of vacuous person who I sort of went to photograph for the Observer, and it was just such a demeaning experience, which I'm happy to go into the detail at some point in the future. But at the end of that, I sort of got my pictures, and then I realised I'd sort of rolled over and been I'd been so kind of acquiescent that I sort of felt ashamed, and I sort of asked her if I could use the loo, and I went in and I put all the toothbrushes that were in the toothbrush holder down the toilet and swissed them around. But I'm more of a sly person that you don't want to get on the wrong side of, but you won't know that you're on the wrong side of. Rather,
I don't know, that's a good thing.
But I do know, I know other photographers who've actually had more backbone
told
than
them
me.
to stick it. Okay, cool. Who's the nicest celebrity you photographed?
Well, Jamie's really nice.
Yeah.
I love Jamie. He's genuine, and especially when he's doing the projects with regard to schools and so on, when you're part of that, which I did a bit of advertising for that at the time, you sort of feel like you're part of something that's really worthwhile. Why he isn't Sir Jamie Oliver, I've absolutely no idea, because he definitely should be, and I'm sure he will be.
In time.
But basically, quite often the people you think you're going to not like, you like, and quite often the people that you want to admire and you really look forward to meeting can be disappointing.
Never meet your heroes.
But most of the time, it's a privilege, because you're meeting people at a point in their lives where they're at the zenith and things are going really well. So it's kind of it really kind of buttresses your sort of sense of positivity about society and life. Anything is possible because you see it, you're seeing it and experiencing it.
Cool. And so I was going to ask who's been the rudest, but I guess it would be the fashion lady. Who you?
I think she was about one of the most unpleasant. I'm sure there's been ruder people.
Okay. He mentions here Mrs. Clinton. That was pretty
yeah,
bad.
I mean, I don't think she was so bad.
Not the rudest. But
I think she was hurting because she'd been trumped. She'd been destroyed by Trump, and she was complacent as well. And I don't have so much of a problem with her. She's quite an amazing person in a lot of ways. Cool. Whereas Isabella Blow, the fashion industries can be really awful, and she exemplified everything that is wrong with the fashion industry: the shallowness, the anorexia, the kind of self-loathing. Okay. She was just appalling.
Okay.
She's dead now.
Okay. So who is there left to shoot that you really, really want to photograph before you retire? For me, answering for you would be Sacha Baron Cohen.
Sacha Baron Cohen, yeah. I think he'd be tricky though, because people I know who photographed him say that he doesn't like to be photographed out of character. Yeah, so you photograph him as Borat.
It's almost like taking the piss.
Or Ali G. But I definitely love to photograph Jerry Seinfeld. Oh, yeah. Morrissey, because I was a huge Smiths fan, even though, he's sort of cancelled himself a bit. And Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Yeah. I love Curb Your Enthusiasm. I've been watching it recently. Anyone in Curb Your Enthusiasm. I have photographed him already, but Larry David? Oh. No, I have photographed Stuart Lee already, but I'd quite like to photograph him again because I am a fan of Stuart Lee's. But yeah, I mean, it's most of the time, there's lots of people. Sam Harris, who I enjoy listening to his podcasts. Jordan Peterson.
You're naming all these.
I'm not a fan of Jordan Peterson's every utterance that he makes, but I think
they're interesting people. I'm sure you'll have a good conversation.
They're people that sort of make up the cultural landscape, and they're kind of. I do think that the medium of YouTube is often overlooked, and it's the new television, and these people are kind of like huge figures in this new medium.
Yeah, and so what about people in all of history? It's the classic three people dead or alive you'd invite to dinner.
I don't know, Jesus. Hitler.
That's all. I'm going to cut that one, but
yeah. I mean, it's impossible to even perceive. Every sort of generation reinvents their perception of Jesus. So. I could say Jesus, but it would only be kind of our perception of Jesus. The kind of way Jesus physically looks changes over
of course,
because of ideas about beauty and ethnicity as well.
Yeah, of course. Did you ever meet one of your heroes only to find out they were a total bell end?
I mean, I photographed Johnny Marr, who's the guitarist of the Smiths, and he's not a bell end at all, but I sort of made the mistake of sort of saying how much of a fan I was, and it just made it a bit awkward because it was just me and him. But he's definitely not a bellend. He's a really cool guy and an amazing musician. But on the whole, I can't think of it. I'm sure there are people, but I don't tend to put people on a pedestal to begin with.
I think that's pretty important if you're photographing celebrities.
I think it's absolutely key because I think they sort of smell weakness, and they want to be able to give over themselves to the process and feel they're in safe hands. So the last thing they want is a fanboy
Yeah, definitely.
who's nervous. You know,
Yeah,
so
100%.
you
You
know,
don't want a nervous doctor.
I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I, and it sounds ludicrous, but I tend to sort of work on the basis that I'm as good a photographer as
They are, as a
Zinedine
celebrity.
Zidane is a footballer,
Yeah.
or maybe David Beckham or whatever.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're snookered. You have to sort of believe you're good at what you do.
Yeah, great answer. So has any of your photo shoots ever been a total failure? So you've got no usable material, you don't feel comfortable sending it to the commissioner?
Yeah. I mean, I was photographing the blues guitarist Buddy Guy, who's a legend, and this is over 30 years ago. So I was just starting out and I was developing all my own film, and it was before I met your mum or anything like that. I was just on my own, and I was using this sort of student dark room in the University of London Union, because there was a student newspaper there, and the idea was that I would help out in return to use I'd get to use the dark room. Anyway, I was trying to maximize the quality of my pictures by sort of putting the film directly in the dark into the developer, rather than pouring the developer in and risking getting marks and stuff on the negatives. It's like, it was stupid, really. And in the dark, instead of putting the film in the canister of developer, I put it in the canister of fixer, which is basically, I was fixing the film before it had been developed. So
Right.
I had nothing, and I basically realized I had nothing. And luckily, the manager of Buddy Guy, and he was staying in Kensington in this hotel, I must have had his number, and I managed to get through to him. I never told the magazine this, and I said, can I come back? I said my assistant is fucked up. I've got nothing, and they took pity on me, and he let me come back. And because I'd shot him before, I just did exactly what I'd done before, and I did this close-in shot, which we can show.
Yeah, we'll pop it up. Yeah.
Yeah, of the hands, but I totally fucked up, and I'm
Okay.
sure there have been once or twice, that sort of thing. My first ever job for the NME, I fucked up.
Yeah, this is an interesting story.
Yeah, so basically, it's also a story that illustrates that, you know, the level of almost masochistic, sort of self-flagellatory kind of approach that you have to have in order to be successful at anything. So
100%.
I went from Devon to London, and then I got this job to go up to Manchester to photograph this band called The Family Way, and the guitarist was called Craig Gannon, and he was in the Smiths. He'd be the fifth Smith, really. And I took my Rolleiflex that we mentioned earlier, and I had a 35mm camera, and I took all these pictures on 35mm, and they were fine. I wanted to do some medium format to really show the NME. This is my first job for the NME, that I was the dog's bollocks. And so someone in the band, they were interested in the camera, and they fiddled with it, and they put it on B, which meant the flash didn't go off, and I didn't have any pictures with the big camera. And I only realized this when I drove all the way from London. So I came back after having been in Manchester to London, stayed a night in Manchester, do the shoot, watch them live, drove back to London. We took the train back to London, drove to Devon. Then I had a pig shed where I developed all my films on the family farm, and I realized I'd not got the medium format pictures. Now, a normal person would have just said, you've got pictures, you've done the job, it's fine. But I phoned up Craig Gannon's management and managed to suggest that I could do a reshoot, and paid to get the train from Taunton up to Manchester for an hour, and then reshot it with the big camera. And, you know, but I did then, as a result, carry on working for the NME, and the next shoot was Tom Petty, Kirsty MacColl, you know, Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
So I didn't want that shoot to dictate my future relationship. I wanted it to be as good as it possibly could be, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, I think that's a brilliant story. Resonated with me, for sure. So how many cameras do you own now?
Any good photographer will say that you know, the only good camera is the camera that you have in your hand, and it's really is. It's a bit like, you know. I used to say to your sister that, you know, being good looking is the least interesting thing about a person. You know, not that she was in any way shallow and concerned with her looks, but you know, she's a young woman and everything. And I just wanted to emphasize that it's the content of her heart that matters. And so really cameras are second to what goes on in your brain and how you see the pictures. So I'd say the number of cameras is there are still quite a lot of, I've still got a few cameras. I've got rid of a lot of film cameras.
It's not about the gear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And anyone will tell you that.
I see so many gear reviews on YouTube and people thinking they need to constantly keep up with the latest tech, and it's just not necessary.
I'd say, you know, you told me to switch to Samsung. You know, my Samsung phone, hashtag Samsung, if they want to give me the latest model. That's a great camera.
Yeah.
I'd say that the camera that I like using is actually the camera that we film these videos on. In spite of the fact that I use, this is all honestly true, I'm not sponsored by any of them. I like the Fuji because it's like high resolution, it's a digital camera, it's a GFX, it's a 50 megapixel sort of medium format sensor. That's pretty good, but it's quite buggy and it's not as evolved as the Sony Alpha Mark III or whatever, which I bought just to film these videos. But as a stills camera, that's probably my current favorite. But my overall favorite will always be the Rolleiflex twin lens reflex. But as you saw on the Robbie Williams video, I've got a 5.4 Linhof Technica.
Yeah.
But what I did do, what I pointed out when we did the film, the little polemic about film versus digital, is get rid of a lot of film cameras, because you won't be able to get film in the future, and therefore, you know, you're just going to be stuck with these sort of attractive.
It's very trendy though, isn't it, as well?
Yeah.
Film.
But it will eventually become impossible to get film.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about film, do you still ever shoot on film?
I did for the Single Dad book. There was a project I'm doing on the Rolleiflex actually, which obviously, I don't know, it's quite nostalgic, and I have got a few rolls of a portrait, but that's a sort of a very slow, ongoing kind of quixotic project that we'll see what happens with that. The short answer is probably no.
Okay. Which film stocks did you use regularly?
Tri-X.
Tri-X.
Agfa APX 100. It's a black. Those are two black and white ones, and then color negative, Portra 160 and Portra 400 Kodak.
Brilliant.
And then, you know, before that I used to cross process sort of EPT, which is a tungsten transparency film. I used to put that through a C41 negative process, and then you get a nice punchy contrasty negative.
Cool. And you mentioned earlier that you were a terrible editor. So were you just paid to take the photos, or is editing part of the job?
I think editing is part of the job.
Yeah.
And you know, you just have to work on your weaknesses. It's like anything else. It's basically like I was very, in terms of the kind of completeness as a photographer, you know, like I think I was sort of very blessed in terms of I had an innate understanding of composition and strong aesthetic sense. But the editing thing is a bit like, you know, being able to kick a ball with both feet. So, you know, I was very right-footed in terms of like, but I had a very powerful shot. Like I could take very, very good pictures, but in order to really be complete, you need to be able to edit the pictures. And also, I'm red-green colorblind, so
yeah, that's interesting.
That affects, you know, the kind of acuity with which I can look at color. I probably don't see it in the same way that somebody who's got normal vision does.
Yeah, I wonder if that's hindered or.
It might have helped because
it makes it interesting.
I haven't got such a huge spectrum of color that someone would see reds really brightly, and sometimes it helps if you have less information in order to make a clear choice aesthetically.
Do you think the development of AI to create photos is going to hasten the demise of your profession? He's put it here.
Yeah. Well, no. I think it'll change it. I mean, AI is really just the sum total of its data set.
Of course.
And so it won't be that. It'll basically. What's already happened is technology has sort of got rid of the journeyman, the people that are kind of like the idea of being a photographer but don't have sort of any talent, people that were sort of humdrum and, you know, just enthusiasts. You know, if what you're producing is not original and is very derivative, that's what AI is really good at, is just basically taking an existing data set and then regurgitating something that looks like stuff that's already been done before. Whereas I think it's good probably for the medium, because it's sort of there's going to be a premium for people who think differently and can be genuinely
quality,
original.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it, for sure.
I mean, basically, I think it's not that AI is going to take anyone's job. It's basically people that can use AI effectively will be the ones who will.
I mean, composite images using Photoshop is already pretty big. So
it's just a tool.
Just another tool, yeah, for sure. I use some AI for the thumbnails of these videos just to expand some things, and it's great. It's really helpful.
I do have some misgivings about these classic pictures. In fact, we should clear that up, because somebody commented about the Robbie Williams being in colour, but it showed how effective it was, that it does look like it had been shot in colour.
Black and white images tend to be less clickable. They don't pop off the screen as much, so I've added some colour using AI a little bit, and it feels a bit dirty ruining Dad's pictures, but
I wouldn't be very keen if it was anyone else doing making colorizing my pictures. Although,
imagine you send an image to a commissioner and they colorize it.
They never do. They do it the other way around. They tend to sort of sometimes they'll basically take a color film and they'll make it a black and white
images.
It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, and would that piss you off?
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't done well, so it looked like it had been shot in black and white. But it would, because I would be expecting it to be reproduced in colour, and I would be making judgments based on that assumption.
Yeah, cool. So someone's asked here, can we make a top 10 video or top 20 photographs you've taken in general? So I thought that would be a fun video. So
yeah, no, maybe top 10, because I think top 20
is a bit mental. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And you, in the most recent video, you mentioned the James Dean image. So someone also asked for a top 10 of your favourite photographs in general. So you say you had this. Yeah, you have a collection of images you always kind of turn to.
Well, maybe we could do it in this sort of format, so I can print them out and then
print them out and then we can talk about it. That'd be awesome. Next time I'm down. So, what's your top 3 photographers that have had the biggest influence on you?
Well, I've said that
these are the closing kind of questions.
Yeah, well, I've said that before. Diane Arbus,
Richard Avedon.
Richard Avedon, Irving Penn, probably my stock response.
Okay.
I mean, there's other people like Larry Sultan.
Okay.
There are people that I sort of think, oh yeah, they are really good. One of my, I'm going to say this, but it will kind of like alienate all my other assistants, but I do really love Annie Collinge. I'm so proud of her success, and in fact, this year she got a Grammy, which is really quite something, working with Rottingdean Bazaar. But she's a really...
Maybe we can throw something of hers up.
Yeah, absolutely.
All of her pictures, I think, are pretty... Like, her website's wicked. So, last 2 questions, kind of fun ones. So, is there a single photo you can think of which you think, like, oh, I wish I took that picture?
Off the top of my head, I mean, there's loads of pictures. Everything that Diane Arbus has taken.
So all of those.
Like I was saying with the James Dean thing, every picture Diane Arbus has taken in her book Monograph are etched into my memory and are there in my subconscious and conscious. Begging me to sort of be influencing my choices. But I mean. I'm quite happy with like some of the iconic pictures I've taken, some of the ones that we featured and are yet to feature on the channel. So I don't think it's too healthy to kind of be put other people on a pedestal and everything. I sort of, I do like it's very rewarding medium, and we're all kind of just floundering around, just trying to make sense of it, and it's a fun process. What I would say is, don't fetishize the pictures that you've taken in the past and obsess about them. I said this I was doing a portfolio review at Oxford Brookes.
I mentioned on the channel that it'd be good to, some people maybe send in some work and we do some review.
But what I said to the students was, you know, don't think what you're doing is amazing, because, you know, none of the pictures I took sort of, you know, there's a few little ones that I really like, but quite often they're more, they had an element of serendipity to me getting them. You know, the thing is, you should always be looking at the picture you're going to be taking tomorrow and moving forward, rather than kind of dining out on past glories.
Yeah. And just to finish it off, you don't have to answer this one, but is there any famous photographers you feel are maybe overrated? Or we don't have to mention this one though if you don't want to.
There are. I'm not going to mention them by name. There are a few photographers that kind of are probably a bit stale and formulaic and just phoning it in. And as well as also in social media, there are clearly people that are kind of pretending to be photographers and kind of dining out on you know, a non-existent career. Sort of they're sort of pressing the right buttons and portraying themselves in such a way, and offering workshops and all manner of kind of ways of replicating their success, which is frankly non-existent.
Good marketers, basically.
Good marketers.
Good advertisers. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks a lot for doing the video.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Anything you want to add?
You better make me look good.
All right, cool.
All right.
That's great. Thank
Okay.
you.